Ford, a name that instantly brings to mind roaring V8 engines, burning rubber, and pure American muscle. From the legendary Mustang to the powerful GT, Ford's muscle car lineup has been nothing short of speed and power for decades. While most are known for their performances, a few models did miss the mark, making you wonder what went wrong under the hood. But guess which Ford muscle car took the crown for the slowest? And why were they beasts that couldn't bite? Well, buckle up as we dive into the 5 slowest Ford muscle cars, and some of them might surprise you. And hey, before we get into the video, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel as it helps us to reach more gearheads, and we would really appreciate it a lot. The 1979 Ford Mustang Turbo GT was supposed to be the Mustang's step into the modern performance era. The 1979 Mustang Turbo was equipped with a 2.3-liter turbocharged inline-4 engine, and while turbo might make you think fast, it only cranked out 132 horsepower. Not bad for a small engine, but definitely underwhelming for the Mustang name. So how fast was it compared to the expectations? Well, it was slower than what you'd expect from a Mustang, as it could only accelerate from a standstill to 60 miles per hour in around 10 seconds, and the top speed was around 110 miles per hour. Not the most thrilling for a car which was branded as sporty. The 1979 Turbo GT was Ford's attempt at blending fuel efficiency with performance, which made sense during the energy-conscious 70s. But the turbo system wasn't the most reliable, and the car suffered from turbo lag, which led to acceleration being felt late. That, coupled with the engine's small displacement, meant it struggled to deliver that punch you expect from a Mustang. So, while the 1979 Mustang Turbo GT was an interesting experiment, it was more about trying something new than delivering true Mustang performance. It did look fast, but didn't have the muscle to back it up. At number 4 is the 1980 Ford Mustang. The 1980 Ford Mustang was a car that, unfortunately, didn't live up to the Mustang name in the speed department. The 1980 Mustang was part of the Fox body generation, which looked promising but never really delivered when it came to performance. The 1980 Ford Mustang has a 4.2-liter V8 engine that produced 118 horsepower, which was the weakest V8 ever in a Mustang. This was due to emission standards, which led to a significant improvement in fuel economy compared to the 1979 model. Now you may be wondering, with all these fuel-saving mechanics, just how many 1980 Mustangs were sold. The 1980s was an era where not everyone wanted a Mustang, and the Ford Mustang sales were well over 250,000 units, but had a large decrease in sales when compared to the sales of the previous year, which had more than a whopping 300,000 units sold. But despite all this, the 1980 Mustang still took a decent time of 10.8 seconds to reach the 60-mile-per-hour mark, which was just enough time for the competition to beat the 1980 Mustang. Now that's not very Mustang-like, is it? Well, the engine was detuned to prioritize efficiency over performance, so it was to be expected. The 1980 Ford Mustang looked fierce, but when it actually came to performance, it was more like a budget-friendly cruiser than a quarter-mile king. When Ford rolled out the Mustang II in the mid-1970s, they were trying to find a solution for the oil crisis that affected every car of that era and the changing emissions regulations. So instead of the powerful V8s that made the Mustang what they are today, they decided to introduce a smaller, lighter option, the V6 engine. The 1975 Mustang II was equipped with a 2.8-liter V6 engine that pumped out a mere 105 horsepower. 105 horsepower in a Ford Mustang was something that should have never been allowed to exist. As for torque, it managed about 150 pound-feet, which was decent, but still wasn't enough. The real kicker was how slow it actually was. The 1975 Mustang II could accelerate 0 to 60 miles per hour in 12.3 seconds and could complete the quarter mile in 18.8 seconds. Now, why was it so slow? Well, this was right in the middle of the 1970s oil crisis, so Ford had to think more about saving fuel and less about burning rubber. Emissions regulations were tightening up, and that meant lower horsepower numbers for almost all of its cars. But the Mustang II was a real letdown for anyone expecting a Mustang to act like a Mustang. And in the end, the 1975 Mustang II was more of a cruiser than a beast. It was great for saving fuel, but if you wanted raw American muscle, this was definitely not the car for you. Taking the number 2 place is the 1978 Ford Thunderbird. Considered as one of the most iconic nameplates from the muscle car era, the 1978 Ford Thunderbird was a muscle car which looked very sleek and was the best-selling Thunderbird with 352,000 units sold. But under the hood, things weren't so impressive. The base model came with a 5.0-liter V8, which sounded promising until you find out that it only produced about 134 horsepower. That's barely more than a modern-day sedan. To make matters worse, the 1978 Thunderbird weighed in at nearly 4,000 pounds. So that little engine had a lot of metal to move around, and that was very noticeable with how slow it accelerated from a standing start. It took the Thunderbird a painful 13 seconds to hit the 60-mile-per-hour mark, and if you had enough patience, it could complete the quarter mile in about 19 seconds. But let's be real, this car wasn't built for speed, it was all about comfort. What made the 1978 Thunderbird so slow was the fact that it was loaded with things like plush seats, power windows, and lower compression ratios, which absolutely killed its power. Although the Thunderbird was a muscle car, Ford focused on making it more smooth and stylish, which meant speed wasn't really a priority anymore. And let's not forget the fuel crisis and new emission rules that made automakers like Ford build cars that focused more on efficiency rather than speed. And as a result, horsepower took a step back too. So in the end, the 1978 Ford Thunderbird wasn't built to be a speed demon you'd take to drag strips. It was built to be a car you could drive home, even if it took longer than expected. And finally, taking the #1 spot for the slowest Ford muscle car is the 1975 Ford Gran Torino Elite. The 1975 Ford Gran Torino had the look of a heavyweight champion, but it definitely didn't move like one. It was slow and definitely not in a rush. The Elite in its name was more about comfort than speed. Under the hood, it came with a 5.8-liter V8, which sounds pretty good, right? But here's the twist for you. It only put out 149 horsepower and had 274 pound-feet of torque, which was decent, but when compared to the competition in those times, it wasn't enough to save this heavy cruiser from its sluggish performance. The 1975 Elite could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 13.9 seconds and complete the quarter mile in 19.7 seconds, but getting there felt more like a long road trip than a quick sprint. Now you may be wondering, what made the 1975 Gran Torino so slow? Well, the 1970s wasn't the best era for muscle cars, and Ford was no exception. By the mid-1970s, the golden era of muscle cars was pretty much over, and it wasn't just because of the oil crisis. Automakers were being hit hard by new government regulations that focused on emissions and saving fuel. On top of that, the 1975 Gran Torino Elite was a big, heavy car, as it weighed around 4,300 pounds. Ford also designed the Elite to be more of a luxury car, so the focus was more on comfort than on winning drag races with outright performance. In short, the 1975 Gran Torino Elite was built for those drives where you didn't mind taking your time. It had the style, luxury, and looked faster than it actually was. And there you have it, the top 5 slowest Ford muscle cars that took a bit more time to get to where they were going. While Ford is known for its high-end performance cars, even the biggest name in the muscle car industry had days where it wasn't at its best. But hey, sometimes it's about the journey and not how fast you get there that counts. So, which of these Ford muscle cars caught you off guard? Drop your answers in the comments below, and make sure to give us a like and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss the next episode of Muscle Car Vault.